Hi, so this is Jeannie, and this is my podcast. So You Think You Can Write? I have a special guest here with me. And without further ado, I would just like him to introduce himself. Hey, how you doing?
Good. Thanks, Jeannie. How are you? And hey everyone, my name is Jack Oree. I am an author, obviously, and writing coach as well. I write mostly women's fiction and some young adult. I write about people who are overcoming traumatic circumstances and becoming who they really are in the process. And I'm really excited to be here.
That's great. So you mentioned that you are a writer of women's fiction.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that would be a very interesting topic. Um, so why did you choose women's fiction?
Well, I kind of fell into it. I'm transgender, first of all, so I
Oh,
was
okay.
raised. I didn't transition until I was in my 30s. So, I grew up being perceived as a girl and socialized as a girl and all that. So I kind of have the experience of being both female and male in a way. And
Uh-huh.
so when I started writing seriously, I really wanted to write about people who are trying to have that transformative process, trying to overcome not knowing who they are. And I also want to write about trauma survivors because both as a social worker and in my personal life, I've dealt with trauma. And so I
Oh.
wanted to write about people who overcome those kinds of things. And so I wrote, and the character that I wrote about in my first novel, Reinventing Hannah, happened to be female, and she wasn't transgender, but she
Mhm.
goes through a similar transformative process after she goes through a very traumatic event and she's trying to figure out who she is. And she goes from being so quiet that her friends call her mouse to being a leader who stands up for herself and other survivors. And, I marketed it as a young adult title, but it has crossover appeal for women's fiction as well. And then with the novel that I'm working on right now, is someone who's older than Hannah. She's medical resident and she has PTSD from her past. She had an abusive boyfriend and
Mhm.
she's trying to overcome that and also trying to find out who's harassing her at work and trying to decide who she is because she's married but she has feelings for her best friend who's female. So all of those things are really interesting women's fiction kind of topics, but it also fits in with the whole overcoming trauma and becoming yourself theme that I'm doing.
So that's great. So you're writing fiction that actually sort of connects with your real life, but not really. It's like
Right.
yeah, it's always good to have that connection with the work that we do, to be connected and to write from, our gut. So how did you get started into self-publishing? And
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I actually started with self publishing a long time ago, around 2008 or so. Um, when I was living in North Carolina. At the time, I was working on a novella called Winter Silence, and this was before I transitioned. So
Mhm.
it was when I was presenting as female and living as a woman and all that. And it was about a 6-year-old girl who it was not a children's book, but it was about a 6-year-old girl who was afraid of singing the Christmas carols at her school. She was the only Jewish kid in her class, and she thought God would be angry at her. And her parents are not really paying attention because they're dealing with her brother being diagnosed with autism. And so I had gone to a writers conference, and I was trying to shop it around, traditionally. And the feedback that I was getting was nobody who's not a child will read a book that's from a child's point of view, which I thought was silly because I knew Angela's Ashes was very popular. And I
Mhm.
knew there were other books that were for adults, like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, that were about kids or teenagers. And so since I kept getting this response and I kept getting you should change your story to be from about the mother instead of the child, which wasn't the story I wanted to
Mhm.
write, I came home and was just like, I'm just gonna do this myself. And at the
Mhm.
time, I didn't really know anything about self-publishing, so I made a lot of mistakes. I wasted a lot of time, a lot of money. Um, and you know, but that was my introduction into the world of self-publishing.
Wow. So you were one of the very first, I think, that started it. So are you with Amazon Kindle exclusively, or are you in all platforms?
Yeah, I'm in Kindle Unlimited, so Amazon, which requires you to be exclusive with Amazon, and then of course the paperback. I did expanded distribution on, so you can find the paperback pretty much
Mm,
anywhere.
that's great. Also, you mentioned about mistakes because so this podcast is about also existing authors that they want to learn more about other authors and what their journey was about. Can you elaborate on what kind of mistakes that you've done and how you were able to correct it and to make it better?
Sure. So at the time that I published Winter Silence in 2008, first of all, I was just in a rush to publish it, and one of the big mistakes I made was at that time I didn't proofread, so I had changed a character's name from Matt to Max, and I'd
Oh,
done find and replace a word, and so then anytime I had the word matter, it changed it to Maxer because it had MATT in the beginning,
oh,
and so that was like a typo that was all through the book that made it look not professional. So
uh-huh.
that was one of the big mistakes I made. And also I published before I was really ready. I didn't really edit it or much or anything. I was just like, I got to a point where it's like, okay, this is done, which is not what I would recommend doing now, obviously. Um, Now I use beta readers and I write several drafts before I even show it to beta readers. But so those are two mistakes. But the biggest, most costly mistake was at the time I didn't know there was no it was I think Amazon Create Space was new at the
Mm-hmm.
time and I didn't really know about it. And at this conference where I decided to self-publish, I met somebody who had a printing company where it was like, oh, we'll print the book for you, send us your cover art and your inside, we'll print the book for you, and you have to buy a minimum of 300 copies. And so that ended up being a big waste of money. I think I still have a box with most of the copies someplace.
Oh, wow.
And um, because now, what I didn't realize then, and it might have been newer then, it might not have been as available, but now you can do print on demand. Like if you upload to Amazon or
uh,
whatever, um, you can just order copies when you want them. So if you're doing a book signing, you can order your author copies directly through Amazon KDP or through Ingram Spark or whatever you're using. You don't have to buy a box full of copies and waste money.
I know I heard
So
about
that was,
that. Yeah. I'm
yeah.
so glad.
That's
I'm so glad about that. The published by demand because yeah, I heard about that like before because I'm new in like the self-publishing world like maybe 2 or 3 years. So oh there's your cat.
yes,
I
there's his
see that.
tail.
I
Showing
see
off
that.
his tail for everyone.
That's so cute. And here's my dog here.
Oh,
What's your cat's name?
Ernie.
Ernie.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute. Look at that. That is so it's just like, yep, I'm gonna that's so funny. So you mentioned about like editing mistakes. So do you now use a software or do you have an editor? And what's your process?
Yeah, so basically, my process is first I go through several drafts because I tend to take a long time figuring out the story as I'm writing. I'm learning more about the characters, and then I'm realizing things I want to add or change. So I write several drafts, and when I have the story and characters the way I want them, then I read over, and I look for mistakes like inconsistencies. Like I have a character in my work in progress who doesn't use elevators because of her PTSD. She prefers to take the stairs, but there's some places in the beginning where it said she got out of the elevator. So I want to change things like that so that it's consistent. And I do run Grammarly to find grammar mistakes because even though sometimes you have to use your own judgment, because sometimes it'll say there should be a comma here, but it should be rephrased like this, and that'll change like the meaning of your sentence or something. So sometimes You have to be like, no, I can take that suggestion, but I do that and do proofreading and read over. And then I have a bunch of beta readers, which are people who usually other writers, sometimes those people who read in the genre, who
Mm-hmm.
they read the book and they give me their feedback, either chapter by chapter, which is really helpful. I like it when people do that because then I can see in each chapter what's working, what doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
or they'll give me their impression as a whole, make more revisions from that. And then after that, I'll send it to an editor. I have a freelance editor that I work with, who will give me more suggestions as well as finding any grammar problems and stuff like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's the last step before I'm ready to. I'm a hybrid author, which means I do some traditional publishing and some self-publishing. So
Mm-hmm.
for things that are self-published, I'll then open. I have a Mac, so I have a program for the Mac called Vellum, where you put your manuscript in, it'll format it as an ebook to go on Amazon for
Mm-hmm.
you so that you don't have to do that yourself. So I'll do that for the ones that are self-published. Obviously, if it's traditional publishing, that's when it's time to start sending out queries and stuff.
That's good. Yeah. I noticed that there is like a more of a streamlined process now. So how long does it take you to write a book from, your manuscript, like from the very beginning, like fleshing out the characters? So how long
Right.
does it take you?
So it depends. I'm getting faster. My book that I published last year, Reinventing Hannah, took me 18 months because I started over several times and then I kept hitting dead ends and stuff like that. Um, Heart Failure, which is the one I'm working on now, took a little bit less time. It took about a year, but then the last draft, I finally figured out more of a process for planning. And so the last draft I wrote in a month. So I'm hoping with the next one, it'll be like 3, 4 months all together
Wow.
and not a year. Because it's hard when you're slow like I am. Because I like if it's taking you a year to a year and a half to get a book out, then that's obviously it's harder to build up a fan base than some people who put a book out every 2 months, every 3 months.
Mhm.
It's easier if you're always having something coming out.
I know. So are you a full like a full-time writer, or do you have like a day job, or are you doing
Oh,
like
yeah, so I'm doing several things. In addition to writing my novels, I also do write freelance articles. So like I write, like I contact a magazine or something and give them an idea for an article. Um, but my main source of income right now comes from I freelance for TV Fanatic, which is an online website that reviews TV shows. So I review some shows for them every
oh
week
wow.
when the shows are on. Um, and I get money from that. And I work with several platforms where you can do ghostwriting, where someone orders an article or a book, mostly nonfiction, sometimes fiction, and you write it for them, and you don't get any credit for that, but you get paid to do it
Wow.
for them. So I do that as well. And I'm also a writing coach. Like I work one on one with writers who dream of writing a book, but they can't seem to get started or they don't know the self publishing process and they want to learn more. So I work one on one with them to help them get their books started and all the way through to the finished product.
Yeah, so I will add a link to the show notes. Like I'm gonna post this on YouTube. So provide me the link to that coaching thing and everything that you have, so that I can also promote
Sure,
you and stuff like that. Because that seems
sure.
very interesting, especially for people that wanna get into writing but they don't know where to start. You definitely need a book coach. And I started with a book coach, and I highly recommend getting a book coach when you're first doing this. Yeah. So do you
Yeah,
have,
definitely.
yeah. So do you have any more like what are your plans for the future projects that you have this year and the upcoming year?
Yeah, definitely. So, Right now, I'm just finishing up on Heart Failure, which I've decided to go traditionally with. So that one I'm getting ready to query. But I'm also working on another indie published novel called The Place Where She Belongs. This is a young adult title about a 12-year-old girl who has undiagnosed autism and how she struggles to overcome after her father's death, and she has to move to a new school, and
Mhm.
she's dealing with bullies and with another girl who's trying to sabotage her as she's trying to work on a project for a science fair and that sort of thing. So, I'm going to be starting to work on that. I'm hoping to get that out this year. That's the next one. And then next women's fiction title that I'm going to be working on doesn't have a title yet, but it will be about a woman who is trying to overcome having had a stillborn baby and how she gets involved with trying to defend a 15-year-old girl who is accused of killing her own baby.
Wow. That's those are really very serious topics as well. And how do you reach out to your fan base and your readers? Like, because that's the thing about indie publishing, and the wonderful thing, and sometimes it's a double-edged sword, because you can connect with the type of readers that are really into that type of genre or subgenre or that type of work. So how do you find your readers, or how does your readers find you, and what is your process?
Right. So there are several ways. I use social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I'm starting to be on TikTok.
Mhm.
I have one video there so far, um, but uh, I'm on all of those platforms where I connect with readers. I also have a mailing list, which I, you can get right now. Right now, I have as a lead magnet a couple of short stories that people get for free if they sign on to my email list.
Mhm.
Pretty soon, I'm going to be also offering as a different lead magnet. I'm testing out getting the first 3 chapters of my novel, of my currently published novel, for free as in exchange for their email address. And so I have that mailing list where I send emails maybe once every 2 weeks, connecting with people, letting them know what I'm up to, asking them
Mhm.
what they think about this or that kind of thing. So all of those are big ways I connect with readers. And yeah, so pretty much like I'm on Facebook a lot. I post about it on Facebook a lot, and connect with readers that way, talk with readers that way. Instagram, Twitter, all of those things. I think it's a big challenge, and I'm on a lot of writers groups on Facebook as well. Like I'm in Aspiring Writers United. I'm in 20 Books to 50K,
Oh
which
yeah,
is one
I'm
of the
part of that
biggest
one too.
groups. Yeah, I think that might have been where I connected with you. I don't remember, but yeah, I'm in all these writing groups, which I think is really helpful. And then another thing, I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to look into it, is, the website Quora, where people could ask questions and you can answer. I basically have like to lurk and read answers to weird questions, but I'm going to start actually using it and like answer writing questions and see if I can connect with people that way.
Yeah, so those are, yeah, actually those are the things that most writers do, actually all of the above, because we never know. You have to create that funnel, to draw people in, because you're right, readers can come from different ways. Social media, it could come from, you know, um do you market your books too? I mean, do you pay like advertising and stuff like that?
I do sometimes experiment with different kind of advertising. A Amazon channel, Brian Cohen, like periodic is a big name in Amazon marketing, and he periodically will do a 5-day free challenge where he will teach people how to use Amazon ads. So I've done that in the past. Sometimes it works, other times. um, and I've done some of those mailing list promos, like newsletter promos, like Fussy
Mhm.
Librarian, e-reader for someone these sites that have big newsletters to their newsletter, and then hopefully the idea is that people will open the newsletter and be like, oh, I want to get that book and order it. But sometimes that works. Again, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And the big challenge of advertising is not spending more money than you're taking in, because you can spend, like anywhere from $30 to $100 on an advertisement, and then if you make $5 from it, that doesn't do you any good. But you have to kind of take those risks, because you have to experiment and see what'll work for your book.
I know. Yeah, it is. That is what my book coach told me. You have to do testing. You have to test, like, okay, I do this. If I do A, will like this happen, So it's always and we can never really that's why you always have to do the trial and error thing, because I have interviewed an author, and I think most of his readers, he got it from his mailing list, or he was just able to just generate like that much clout and stuff, and he just kept on like doing the mailing list, and it just grew. And then I think he does it full time. I think he was one of the first authors I interviewed. So yeah, it could be Amazon ads, it could be, marketing with other, as you said, what was it again? What is fuzzy logic? I have not heard about
Fussy Librarian.
fuzzy
Yeah, it's a
librarian.
yeah. Fussy Librarian is one. E-reader cafe. I'm trying to think of some other ones I've tried. Bargain Booksy. There are a lot of them. They're basically their promos where you pay to be, and they put your book on their mailing list for a day. Like, these are companies that, like, every day they send out emails being like, here's a list of books that you might be interested in, to their subscribers. So like, you pay to be on one of these lists on a specific day. And then there are a lot of factors that go into it. Like, when I did Fussy Librarian, it happened that the day that my ad ran was July 4th, which, in the US is the Independence Day. So there might not have been a lot of people checking their email that day. So it might not have worked as well as at another time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
You
it's
know,
also
so,
about
so yeah.
timing as well. Yeah, I tried that one. I forgot what it was called. It could be I think it was Bargain Booksy, I think I tried. Yeah. That's the one where you pay them a certain amount, and then they guarantee a certain amount of readers and stuff will reach out to you and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So since you are literally writing, freelance writing and writing your own books as well, what is your process? Do you like write a certain amount of time, a certain amount of words, or do you start from 8 o'clock and then you end at 9? So what is your process?
Right. So yeah, so I try to have a daily schedule where I try to do like the freelance stuff in the morning if I can, and then in the afternoon work on my own stuff. And which isn't always possible, because of the reviews I do, the shows come on at night, so I have to write the review at
Ah,
night. But most of the time, unless sometimes the press companies will give you an advance copy of your reviewer, and then I
mm,
can watch that and write the review whenever. But anyway, but I do try to keep a schedule, and I do have a goal of, I try for 1,500 words a day in my own stuff, but depending on what else I have going on, sometimes that's not gonna happen.
mhm.
So try to have a flexible goal where you aim for a certain amount of words every day. But the important thing is to write every day, because even if it's just for 5 minutes, it's still some progress, and it's still that habit of being like, I have to write today. You know.
Yeah, actually, I've interviewed like a lot of authors now. That is what they have been saying. They either have a word count, or they just write every day. They just do it just to keep the juices flowing, so to speak. So yeah, that is really good advice. Yeah. Speaking of advice, so if there's someone that is new to self-publishing, or they want to publish a book, what can you give them?
Okay, so the first thing is don't get overwhelmed because you're gonna get a lot of conflicting advice every place. And it all depends where you are in the process. If you're still writing the book, that's separate from if you're ready to self-publish and you don't know how to get started. So, one of the important things is to figure out like what your questions are, like where you want to what it is that you want to do next. As far as self-publishing goes, the most important thing is number one, well, a couple of things. Number one, keep in mind that self-publishing is not going to be an easy route. Sometimes people think that. Sometimes people are like, oh, all I have to do is put my book up for sale and people will buy it. And there's a lot more to it than that. So it's important to keep that in mind. And when you're thinking about self-publishing, I think it's important to realize that you're becoming a business owner. Um, self-publishing is a business, and you the big difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing is that when you self-publish, you're responsible for deciding what your cover looks like. You're responsible for deciding what the inside of the book looks like, for your website if you have one, for how you're going to market, you know, where you're going to put it, or you're going to put it just on Amazon, or you're going to put it other places. All of that stuff is decisions that you're going to have to make. Whereas if you traditionally publish, some of that is taken over by the publishing company, like the cover design and stuff like that. So it's important to realize all those things. Um, and don't try to do it alone. Definitely connect with people like me who have been through it. Connect with people on those big groups, like 20 books to 50K, I think is mostly self-published authors. There are a few
Mhm.
hybrid authors on there. I saw a question there this morning about is anyone else also a hybrid author? So I know that there are people who do it both ways there.
Mhm.
Um, but definitely you want to be in those groups, like connect with other authors so you can get advice when you need it. As the most important, so you can get encouragement when you need it, because there are going to be days where you're going to be like, I haven't made any sales. Why did I do this? This was a waste of my time. Maybe I'm not a good writer. All that kind of stuff. And that's when you need people to kind of cheer you on and be like, this is part of the business. It doesn't mean you suck, you know, and there is a learning curve, and you definitely, and it's also a thing where most of the time you don't want to just write one book and that's it, right? Like, especially if you're going to self-publish, you're going to always want to be thinking about what's the next book, because the more books you have, the more people are going to be interested in reading, because people like to read authors. Like, a lot of people, whether they do Kindle or they do paperbacks, are like, oh, I loved this book. What else has this person written? And if you only read one book, they're going to forget about you, this author. But if you have other books out, then after they read one book, they'll be looking for your next book. And that's something that, like, you definitely, one of the reasons you want the mailing list is because if people are connected to you on the mailing list, if you only have one book currently, like right now, I only have one out because I'm working on the next one. um, you can definitely in that mailing list be like sharing, like, this is what I'm doing next. This is, so that you can keep people's interest.
That's right. Yeah. Those are really amazing advice that you just gave. And it actually just um, summarizes what the self-publishing journey is about. It is like long term. It's not like one time, big time thing. It's like a process, and it's like it eventually snowballs and stuff. So that's why and you are right. People have this misconception that you can just write a book and rest on your laurels and then just like, yeah, I'm just gonna rest. But you have to really constantly be creative and push yourself creatively. That's great. It's a really good advice. And yeah, and if you can promote your book coaching thing, um
Sure.
yeah, you can do it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There are two places that you can look. You can look on my website, which right now is jackaore.com/give birth to your book.
Hmm.
Which has also on Facebook. I have a Facebook group, Book Writing Warriors. Uh, which I'll put both of those links in the chat so you can put them in your show notes as well. But so you can definitely connect with me on Facebook as well. And and those are our two places where you can get a hold of me for book coaching. You can also I am on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok on the handle author Jack Ori.
Mhm.
So you can connect with me there, and from there, and that's another way that you can get to know me and get to find out about my book coaching. And on Facebook, you with my personal Facebook coach and author degree. Also, obviously look at if you don't remember that. But connect with me there as well.
Yeah, I think you have to repeat the last thing that you said. That you getting your signal is like fading in and out. Just maybe the last thing that you said. Yeah, it's kind of it's okay. But anyway, even if we don't get it,
Yeah, you're too.
yeah,
Yeah.
it will be on the show
Okay.
links. Um, there's show
Okay.
notes. I usually put show notes on my podcast and the YouTube. So everything that you just mentioned, it will be on the show notes. Just look below. Yeah. And yeah, there you go. At author Jack Ori. So it's Jack, JACKORI. And coach at coach and author Jack Ori. Ori
Yeah.
is with an ORI. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
that's Facebook. Yeah. And my Facebook is public. So even if you don't feel comfortable sending a friend request, you should still be able to see my posts.
yeah. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it's been like I also learned a lot from this interview. And that's the thing about, you know, interviewing authors. You always learn something new and about their process. And then um it's just been I've just had an amazing interview with you. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
You're welcome. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. And also, my book that is out is called Reinventing Hannah. It's about a
Mhm.
16-year-old girl who, after she is, unfortunately, she's sexually assaulted at a party, and then she goes from being very so quiet, her friends call her mouse, to go through a transformative process where she becomes a speaker and an advocate for herself and other survivors in her school. So that's on Amazon if anyone wants to check it out.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And have a nice day. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.